Yeah, I think so too. And like traditional blocks are classic for a reason, because they're well, in some ways they're easier than something that can take a lot more technique and everything to get used to. But and then just like pleasing, right? It's like symmetry and just like design elements that are classic that you can use no matter what. But yeah, like you said, using modern fabrics and using a white background instead of maybe a gray or something like that, and makes the colors pop and that kind of thing. And I like playing with that and sort of seeing where you can take traditional but make it feel more contemporary. And
I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Hey there, Not Your Granny's Quilt Show podcast fans. I am looking for new guests. So if you are interested in chatting with me on the show, please email us. We'll put that down below, and let us know what you want to share with us on the show, and we will get in contact with you and get you on. I can't wait to chat with you, and hopefully we get some really great episodes. Thanks. Today's guest is Holly Clarke of Holly Clarke Design. You probably know her from her Instagram handle, Hold My Seam Ripper. She is here to talk about her fantastic quilt patterns and projects that she has in the works. So please welcome Holly with me. It's a lot.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're in Winnipeg?
I am, yeah.
Ooh, I think you're our first Canadians. I'm very excited.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
That's great. I am representing all of Canada.
Yay! I'm so excited to have you here. I think, I don't know how or what brought me to your Instagram, but I saw your Instagram handle, Hold My Seam Ripper, and I was like, I need to be friends with this girl.
It's funny. I've thought of changing it like a lot of times. Like it's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't like have my name in it. So I think, is it appropriate? But so many people tell me that they like it. I'm like, well, maybe I should just keep it because it makes people laugh. So
yeah, I think, because then it made me go, who is this? And it brings people to you, I think, because it's a funny play on a phrase, and I loved it. I thought it was great. And then of course I loved your content, so I was like, well, I'm here to stay, so
come for the Instagram handle, stay for the quilting.
Exactly. Yeah, it was, I don't know, I just look for things like that because I have a big sense of humor, and I think I find I just love the joy of taking things and making them, if they make you laugh, then make it happen,
Hopefully they make other people laugh. And
yeah, I feel like that's how you find your people, is you put your sense of humor out there, and then those that like it flock to you, and you're like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't like it, you don't have to stay.
Yeah, like, please leave. No. I'm just kidding. Well, I think too, one of the first things I saw of yours was your when it was before, but you were kind of teasing up to your Great Expectations quilt. And I think I was just seeing like your progress of like teasing the blocks and like kind of putting it out there. And maybe I found you before that, but that was when I first was like, wait a second, like what is happening? This is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
it's
kind of in May.
Oh, pardon me?
That just came out in May. The pattern.
Yeah. What day is it today? Like I
know.
Yes, May. It just came out like a couple of weeks ago. I started it last fall, I think in November or something. I made a first version of it, and then I posted some blocks, and it was a little more subtle, like it was solids and just a really fine blender print that I used. And then so many people, it was like one of my biggest like posts, like when I first started posting about it, and I was like, oh, there's some interest here. So it took a little while, but developed it into a pattern and just released it last month. And yeah, so it's kind of fun. It's really it's based on traditional blocks, but just sort of in a fun, more modern way. So I think it's resonated with people. So
yeah,
that's all it did. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's like a funny, not funny, but just a trend that's happening, because before it was just like all modern, nothing classic, and then now I keep seeing more and more newer patterns coming out that are just more, traditional looking. There's still modern twists to them, but so I think people are really kind of seeking that nostalgic sense of style in quilting. And so I don't
Right.
know, but yeah, the modern twist with the modern fabrics and all that, I think makes it even more special.
Yeah, I think so too. And like traditional blocks are classic for a reason because they're well, in some ways they're easier than something that can take a lot more technique and everything to get used to, but and then just like pleasing, right? It's like symmetry and just like design elements that are classic that you can use no matter what. But yeah, like you said, using modern fabrics and using a white background instead of maybe a gray or something like that, and makes the colors pop and that kind of thing. And I like playing with that and sort of seeing where you can take traditional but make it feel more contemporary and
Mhm. Yeah.
fun. I don't know, like
Yeah.
looking at older quilts, sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's okay, you can appreciate the time and the effort that went into it, but it doesn't really resonate visually with me. And so
Yeah.
I like to make it more fun and bright, and I like lots of color.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I hadn't really ever made like anything classic, but we're like, whatever. I can't think of the word all of a sudden, um, but I know I've talked about it before on the show, but I like fell into just making a ton of sawtooth stars and a ton of flying geese and just these kind of more traditional, that's the word, traditional, these more traditional style looking quilts. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually really love this. And like some were involved in more modern patterns, but some were just, some patterns were just the sawtooth star, or some were just mostly flying geese. And so yeah, I just love the traditional, but the modern twist on that. And
Right. Well, I think even just taking something traditional like a flying geese unit and just making a whole bunch of them is a modern twist, because I think traditionally it was used as an element with other pieces, like whether it was, a half square triangles or just like a 9 patch or whatever. And but just using it on its own and just like repeating it a whole bunch, or like making it huge or making it really small, or
yeah,
just sort of playing with the scale. And I think that gives it that modern twist that you might not have seen, 100 years ago.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so fun to see kind of the evolution of things and how like, it was all half square triangles and, herringbone and all these different things, starburst patterns. And then now it's like, okay, let's come back and like revisit these traditional concepts. Not that they ever went away, but I just think they're, at least for me, they seem to be popping up more in the zeitgeist of quilting. So
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't been quilting for very long, but um, you definitely see trends. Like even in the short time that I started in 2017, and just like in that short time, seeing trends come and go already is kind of fascinating to me. That something that has been around for whatever hundreds of years, and we've
yeah.
sort of taken it on this like fast track of like trends and everything already. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just love it because I think it kind of changes with fashion too. Like, fashion changes. And then I think kind of quilting pulls that into it almost. Like, I
Yeah,
think there's more of like retro trends happening right now. And then that's being pulled into the quilting world. And like, I mean, just the fabric that's on the quilt behind you, there's like nostalgia in it,
yeah, for
the
sure.
Ruby Star stuff that like they're pulling all those kind of nostalgic, the roller skates and the rotary phones and all those things into their
Yeah,
print.
definitely. And colors too. Like you
Mhm.
totally see the I mean, not that everybody does the same thing, but you definitely see that those trends, those fashion trends pull in, because we bombarded with influences from all over, like all different aspects of your life, right? And so you definitely see those influences coming into what you're going to choose in your fabric selections and how you're going to put colors together and all of that. And I was shopping with my daughter the other day, and and there was I forget what it was, like a bag or a shirt or something, and it was in the Kona color of the year, and I was like, color of the year.
You're like, I know that.
And she's like, that's not the Pantone color of the year. And I said, no, Kona.
Kona color.
Same. She's like, I don't know what that means, but I'm like, it's a thing.
It is. I know, it's so funny because it's like everybody was like, oh, the Pantone color of the year, and it's gorgeous, I love it, but because it's purpley and kind of a periwinkle, but then Kona's like, actually it's this.
Over in this part of the universe, we're doing this color.
yeah, which I love it too, so I don't care, but it's fun to see like the different takes on like where those colors come into play, and like where you see them pop up throughout, the year, to see if people really hang on to it. And I was like, oh, it'd be so fun to make like almost like a monochromatic quilt with the color of the year. And I know lots of people do that, but I have never done it.
No, I haven't either. Yeah, but that's actually an interesting idea. Like even if you made the same quilt each year, but you changed it up with the color, just to have your own sort of record of that.
Or even if you just made a block and then just like added a block.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah, do a block a year of each color.
It'd take you a while.
Yeah.
Like, depending on how big you make it, it could take you a really long time.
Maybe like a 20-inch block or something.
Yeah, make it real big.
Really big.
No, I think we're geniuses. I like it. That would be so fun though, just to kind of see the evolution of like how that color changes and like the influences of it. But anyway. Yeah. I'm also like, other side note of one of your projects, but I am like bound and determined I want to make a quilt clock. I love it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so fun. And like, I want to almost like dismantle the clock that's in the quilting studio and just do it in there, because I'm like, why not? Like,
yeah, totally. It's been a kind of fun thing, like to see what people have made. So I don't know if you read my blog post about it, but I was like, during COVID, I was always working out in my bedroom because, that's what you do. And I have this really old fashioned clock. It doesn't even work, but it's like right at my eyesight. And I hate exercising. So I'm just like, as I'm doing whatever, I'm staring at this clock right at my eye height. And I just kept like piecing it out into like pie shaped units in my head. And then I was like, oh, I could make that.
Like, Eureka.
And so I started playing around with it and realized, well, I had a few older clocks that I didn't care if I wrecked them, if I took them apart, and realized that they came apart fairly easily. I wrecked a couple because at first I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just jamming the screwdriver in the back trying to take it apart. But then I went and bought a whole bunch of really cheap ones at IKEA. And took them apart. They just popped apart really easily, and was able to like make all these little wedges. And it was just a fun project. And then I just put it up on my website as a freebie. And like it's crazy how many downloads that thing has gotten.
Yeah. Well, it's just fun to see like and search hashtags. Like that's my favorite thing to do, is like find a hashtag of something I love and go look at other people's versions, and just like that's so inspiring, because I'm like, oh, I never would have thought to put those fabrics together or like do it that way. But yeah, it's just been super fun to see all the different versions out there and what people are sharing. But I was like, I'm gonna do this. I always say that about things that I never have time, because
well, it's really fast. So even if you have like a couple hours one night, it probably won't even take you that long. It might take you longer to figure out how to take your clock apart and put it back together. But the actual like making the quilt face or the clock face is pretty quick. And yeah,
it seems simple, but
yeah,
I love it. It's so fun. I'm like, how many clocks do I really need?
Yeah, I know. Well, I just made a new one last month with some scraps from the Great Expectations quilt. And I was like, I don't really need this, but it was a red clock and my quilt was like reds and pinks. So it's like, I can't not, like, I have to do this. So now I have, I don't know, like 3 of them are hanging in my sewing room. And then I've got other ones throughout my house that I'm like, we need a clock here.
Yeah. Well, honestly, like it's so nice to have multiple clocks around because then you don't have to like go look for one if you don't have your phone or your watch on or something. And then just especially in the quilt studio, because I want to look at like where my sewing machine is and like where the clock, because the clock is like directly behind me on the opposite wall from where I'm sewing when I'm in my quilt studio. And so I'm always having to like turn around and it's so annoying because I'm like, if I just want to glance at the time or something, I like, there's another wall that I just want to like look to the left and see it. And so I'm like, what if I just make a new clock for this? Because this is driving me crazy. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I will definitely post pictures and tag you because
that's great.
Happen.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
It's just so fun. The creativity and you can do whatever fabrics and just make a million clocks because who doesn't need to know the time?
Exactly.
That's so great. I just love it. So cute. And then I saw, or you're like posting blocks, like a new quilt pattern you're trying out, the breeze block.
Yeah, the breeze block quilt. I
like, am I saying this correctly?
You are, yes. Okay. So I was Lisa Flower, who does fabric design for Paintbrush Studios or PBS Fabrics. She asked me if I would want to. I've partnered with her on a couple of other collections of hers, and she asked if I'd want to do this one. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God, yes, it's so perfect because it's all just like vintage vacation, summertime fun and everything. And I was like, oh, this is so perfect. And one of the prints is based on breeze block, like a breeze block wall design. And I was like, trying to think of like, what am I going to make with this? And because it's just really like, a lot of it is larger scale prints and it's really fun and everything. So I was like trying to find something that would fit well with that. And then when I saw the breeze block print, I was like, oh, I could make a quilt block out of this. And it's all like curved, it's like 4 curved corners and with like an inset white strip between each. I don't know, you have to look at it.
We can post a picture in the video portion as well, like on the YouTube. So we'll pop the picture up so people can see.
Okay, perfect. And so it took a little while to kind of figure out how to make, and then the center part is one piece. So it's not like, so the larger scale prints worked really well in that center sort of diamond shape. And then just like put them all together like a breeze block wall. And so it's kind of fun. Like, I don't know, I kept saying breeze block. it's a little repetitive, but anyway, it's fun to do. So I posted that last week, or I just finished it up last week and posted it, and it's been a fun project to work on. So, and I've got a lot of like requests of like, when is the pattern coming out? So I'm actually working on a pattern right now.
Awesome.
And I don't know, I always say I'm working on it, but I never have like any deadlines until I like actually write it. I don't want to set a deadline because life, it's hard. There's lots going on. So maybe this summer I can get it out.
It's so cute. Well, and at first I was like, what's a breeze block? And then I was like, oh, they're those like cinder block or like concrete blocks that have like the design in them with holes through it so that the breeze can go through.
Right. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
like,
Sorry. I
built
should
a
have said
wall.
that.
No, it's okay. I had to look it up for myself because I was like, a breeze block. I was like, what's a breeze block wall? And then but then I kind of like, mentally pieced together. I'm like, oh, I think it's those things. And so I looked it up and I was like, oh, yeah, they're like concrete blocks that build a wall and they've got these cool designs in it. And it's like, of course you could quilt that. Like,
Well, the more I looked at them, the more, like there's lots of different like classic styles of them, and some are round and some are diamonds and some are whatever. And I was like, you could do a whole series of these, like, because
yeah.
they're all like, typically they're all squares,
Mm-hmm.
and you could do like a whole quilt of different breeze block designs or something. It would be really cool. We don't have a lot of them here because it like I think typically they're in warmer climates, so you can have sort of like a privacy wall but have some airflow.
Yeah.
And like it gets hot in here in the summer, but we have a lot of cold months, and so it's
we do.
not a thing.
Yeah.
But actually, there are some places in town that have them, like mostly like residential, someone will have a fence or whatever. And I wanted to take a picture like in the wild in front of one, but I couldn't find one that wasn't residential, and I didn't want to like creep onto someone's yard.
You're like, excuse me.
So I gave up on that. But then on Monday, I took my son to the dentist, and it was in a different part of town. And as I was parking, I was like, oh my God, there's like a city block at the back of this parking lot that's just a huge breeze block wall. And it's kind of like that whole part of town has a lot of like 1960s architecture. And I was like, oh, of course I should have like come and scoped out this neighborhood more. But I was like, okay, next time if I do another one of these, I'm gonna have to use that wall, because it's like massive, and it's not like pristine, it's old, so there's some parts that are kind of falling apart, but some of it is still like in really good shape. So like, now I know.
Yeah, immediately what popped in my head is like, oh, that's like in a 1960s neighborhood, like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
feeling of it.
Like think Palm Springs, like the mid-century modern architecture, like uses a lot of it. And when we went to Palm Springs, I don't know, about 5 years, I don't know, time is like, I don't know. What is it? We went to Palm Springs once with our family, and just like love driving around the neighborhoods, and so many of them have those kind of walls, and it's just so cool.
Yeah, it feels like you're almost like transported in time.
Yeah.
Everything is so mid-century modern, and kind of those like classic lines, clean lines, and the landscaping. I don't know, it's crazy. It just feels like a different world there.
And so well preserved, like everything is pristine, and like those homes are very well kept, and I think that's wonderful, because that's not always the case, but it's such a fun place to go.
Oh man, that's so fun. And like, because those blocks, like they already have that retro feel, like those fabrics. I was like, oh my gosh, dying. They're so cute.
Yeah, they work really well together. And
it's called Sunshine Inn, that line?
Sunshine Inn, yes. By Lisa Flower. And I have some leftovers, and now I'm like, what else can I do with this? Because it's pretty fun. I might make like a beach bag or something like that.
That would be perfect. I know, it's just like, it's like I see it and I immediately want to be like by the pool sipping a daiquiri or something,
Yeah, exactly.
If it would just get warm enough.
Yeah. If spring would hurry up and come. It's sunny out today here, but it's been a really awful spring, and I feel like summer's never coming, but gotta come.
Ours has been really rainy and gross too. Today's like 83, but then it's going to be, well, Fahrenheit, I don't know if you are Celsius, but it's going to be warm today, and then tomorrow it's going to drop back down, and then a cold rainy weekend. I'm like, why? It's always the weekend. It's like hot in the middle and then cold on the weekend, and hot in the middle, cold on the weekend. I'm like, I need this to just even out.
It's been the same here, and it's been so frustrating. Like normally we would have, beautiful flowers planted and everything, but like I haven't even touched my garden this year because I'm like, we're still getting frost at night some days, and like it's crazy. I'm like, forget it. I'm not putting anything in until it's like solidly hot, because no, not yet.
Yeah. I know it's too stressful because I'm like, I don't want to kill my plant babies. I did plant a watermelon. We'll see how it fares, but
oh well.
I don't know. I'm like, we're gonna wing it and try this one. So we'll see.
Oh boy, I've never planted watermelon, but I have planted like cucumbers that get massive and that kind of thing. And it's just like, oh man, we're eating a lot of cucumbers this summer.
I've had no luck with cucumbers, but last year some squirrels planted some pumpkin seeds in my garden bed.
Really?
And I just had these rogue pumpkin plants, and I was like, oh, I'll just let them grow. It doesn't matter. And they took over everything because I think it was like 3 or 4 plants, and it's not a very big space. Like my garden bed isn't that big. So like one would have been plenty, but it took over our whole, like half of our side yard, like more double than the garden. Like it was crazy. It was like climbing up the fence. It like enveloped a bike that we had just kind of sitting out there. I was like,
wow,
never again.
And how many pumpkins did you get from that?
And they were small. They were like little kind of white. There was like a bunch of different kinds that were growing on the plants, but they were, pretty smallish in size, but probably got, let's see, 20, 30.
What?
Probably like 60 to 70.
What?
Yeah, small, because there ended up being like 3 or 4 plants that just sprung up, and I was like, well, I'm gonna just let them grow and see what happens. And
wow,
it was a mistake. I was like, I made a mistake. Like hacking back vines. It was crazy.
Wow. So your like autumn front yard decoration was like all taken care of that year, huh?
I literally just like pick it off the vine, go put it in the front yard, pick it off the vine, go put it in the front yard. I was like, Mom, come get some pumpkins. I called my sister-in-law. I was like, send the kids. They can have all the pumpkins they want. I was like telling like past students, because I used to be a teacher, like telling past students, I'm like, come to my house, come get pumpkins. Like coworkers, I'm like, you need pumpkins for your front step? I've got some. It was bonkers, but anyway. So hopefully that doesn't happen with the watermelons, but we'll see.
Yeah. I feel like you'd probably be able to get rid of watermelons easier than pumpkins because people actually will eat them, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, they probably won't leave our house because we love watermelon.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, I might share 1 or 2. We'll see. It has to live first, so.
Yeah. Get past the cold spring, then you can decide what to do.
Yeah. I just love gardens, and I've never been super great at growing stuff, but my mom has always had like a really great garden. And so I always have the aspirations to grow amazing things, but I think it's fun now because I'll see kind of like a patchwork of plants. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be like such a fun like quilt layout, or like seeing people's gardens. I'm like, oh no. I just see quilts everywhere. And I'm like, oh, am I losing my mind? Because it's like all I think about.
Yeah, no kidding. Like you go to the hardware store and you're looking at tile and you're like, oh, quilt.
I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be such a beautiful quilt. My husband's like, please stop.
Yeah, it's good to be inspired wherever you go, but it can be hard to turn it off sometimes.
Yeah. Do you find that as well? Are you like picking everything apart to try to think of quilts, or what
absolutely
inspires you?
Yeah, like even watching, I don't know, like the news or something, and there's something in the background that's like, a cool poster or something. I'm like, I like they've done with the colors there. I'm gonna write that down.
You're like, pause that, I need to take a picture.
Yeah, I'm always finding something to inspire me, and sometimes I need to rein it in because you can only work on so many things. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the other day, actually, when I started writing the breeze block pattern, I was looking through an old folder and on my computer and found another pattern that I completely forgot that I had started. And I'm like, I've got like this thing like halfway done. I've got all the pieces laid out. I've figured out the fabric requirements. Why didn't I finish this? I'm like, I should get on that. Because,
like, what happened?
like, I must have gotten distracted with something else, surprisingly. And
yeah.
Anyway, it was sort of like finding a $20 bill in your pocket. Like, oh, I forgot this was here. Now I feel like I'm ahead of the game. So.
You're like, hey, this is neat. Yeah, it's like, oh, you know, a few minor tweaks here and there, and you've got a whole quilt pattern that you can release. And
yeah,
that's fun. I know. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Well, so we've been quilting for pretty close to the same amount of time, but what got you into quilting?
Well, I started sewing like when I was in university. I took fine arts in university, and I had never really sewed before that. But I was, for one of my art projects, I decided I wanted to do something with fabric. Who knows why? And so I asked my mom to show me the basics of the sewing machine again. And like, she had tried to teach me before, but I was like, it's not for me. And anyway, I'm like, I was determined because I wanted to do this project. And so I started, so I made all these like crazy hats, and they all had sort of, you know, art school reasoning behind them and everything. Kind of a goofy project, but I actually discovered that I really liked sewing. And so I started making more and more hats. And then I had a friend who had a store at a local market here, and she said, do you want to come sell them at my store? And I was like, okay. So she would just like place orders. I would start, and all kinds of just like crazy hats. And but they did really well, and I ended up realizing that I could actually do that sort of as a job for my last year of school. And so I like quit my part-time job and started just making and selling hats. So I did that for a long time. And then when I had kids, I had sort of shifted that to making baby clothes and stuff. And I started a baby clothing and, you know, giftware business. And which I still run. It's called Small Potatoes. And it's a fun, it's very different from quilting, but you know, same types of inspirations and stuff. I like using, you know, fun, not babyish fabrics, but more, a little more, I don't know what not sophisticated, but you know, something that's not just like teddy bears and stuff. So so I've done that like since 2005, I think. And I had no interest in quilting, but I use mostly quilting cotton. So I would always see all the promotional stuff from the fabric companies, and it would always show quilts, and I would just scroll past it. Like, if quilts, not for me. Like, nope. And then in like 2017, I don't know, something clicked, and I was like, I really like that. Like, I like what's happening. And maybe it was just starting to see more modern patterns come out and that kind of thing. And my background is in graphic design. Like, I'm actually still a full-time graphic designer. And so just seeing that, like, being able to marry my like love of design and graphics and being able to put that into fabric, I was like, oh, this is actually, why did I tune out of this for so long? And once I started, I was like totally hooked. And the first quilt that I made, I didn't really even realize there were quilt patterns then. I was just like, well, you just make something that you like. That was my plan. So I like sketched something up in Illustrator, printed it out in like line art, and was like, I'll just make shapes. But I don't know why, but I didn't even think of like seam allowance and stuff. So none of that was built in. It was just like, it was kind of like a sampler quilt, all these different blocks. But I didn't know there were like, here's how to make a half square triangle. Like, I just cut out triangles and like put them together. And I was like, oh, why doesn't this fit? So it took a long time, but then I realized after doing that there's actually like instructions on how to do this kind of thing out there. So I started
Yeah.
like buying actual patterns and like reading instructions and following instructions and like, oh, this is why people love this. This is actually not as crazy as that first one I made.
Yeah.
And then I got to the point where I was like I could do this. I could make patterns. And so started doing, I think in like 2019, I put out my first pattern, and it's still one of my best sellers. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've sketched stuff out. I've kind of, designed my own thing, but I've never like made up a new block. It's just been like, oh, I can use blocks I know and, kind of design my own thing. But I just love the creativity that people come up with, like pattern designers, because it's so inspiring and I love to make them. And it's not something like designing patterns isn't my jam, but I will definitely make the heck out of a pattern if I love it. And so it's just always like so fun to me to listen to, like, how do you do it?
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, I will, like I said, I'll just sort of be inspired by something, and I'll literally take a photo or write it down or sketch it out or something. And then it's sort of like gets in my head, and I can't tune it out. I have to see what happens if I make it. And I usually start in Illustrator, where I'll lay something out to figure out how much fabric, or if it's like an unusual shape or something, I'll make myself a template and then try to figure out how does that shape fit in with other shapes and things like that. And then I'll print it out from there. And then I literally can't focus on anything else until I like at least try that idea. So I have lots of just orphan blocks of things that I've tried and realized either that's never going to work, or it's I don't know, it's just too much work and nobody would ever want to make this because it's like kind of crazy, or there's weird, like you end up with really thick seams and it's just silly, like, not. So then either I abandon it or move on to the next thing, or I go back to Illustrator and figure out, well, how could this actually work? And like, how can you just put the pieces together so that it's actually something that fits properly and that kind of thing. And then back to my fabric scraps and try it again.
It's like a big puzzle ultimately, right?
Yeah. And I love puzzles. I love trying to figure out stuff. And so so I do like those challenges. And then like I said, I have lots of abandoned things that didn't work, but they made sense on paper or in Illustrator. But then the ones that do work, I love running with them and seeing what happens. So making a few different versions of a quilt to see how it looks in different fabrics, or if you changed the background, or if you added sashing or took away the sashing, or add a big fat border or something, and it can really change the look of it. And I like seeing where that can go. So then I end up with a massive pile of quilts. I'm like, what do I do with all these?
I think that's kind of like the fun side effect of like trying stuff out and like, well, I just want to try this, so I'm gonna just make it real fast and see what happens. And then you're like, oh no, I have 85 quilts.
Oops. How did that happen?
I'm not sad about it, but
no. I like my little stack of quilts, and I like every once in a while pulling them out and putting a new one out on the couch. And I mean, we have lots on the couch already, but I'll pull one out that I was like, it was too precious to use when I made it. I didn't want it covered in cat hair and whatever. But,
exactly.
But like, you know what? It's not doing me any favors, just in a pile. So bring it out, use it.
I think I preach it, and I had to bring out my graduation quilt that my mom had made for me because I was like, it's got white minky. I can't let anybody touch it. She was like, get that off the shelf and use it. I was like, yes, ma'am.
Right.
And now, it's the one that lives on the back of the couch, and and I have them hanging over the lazy boy, or over the couch arm, and then I've got one hanging on the wall in the living room, and it's just, they're everywhere. But it's fun to have different stacks, different quilts to swap out and change out. And I think the idea that there's too many quilts, or I have too many quilts, I'm like, no, you don't.
You always use more.
Yeah. Like,
do you make seasonal quilts, like for different parts of the year?
Yeah. Well, I say yes. I do have some I like to put out seasonally, but I like, this last Christmas was the first Christmas quilt I made.
Oh,
so
okay.
I just barely made a Christmas quilt, but I had a Nightmare Before Christmas quilt, like the Jack Skellington. Yeah. So I had a panel in the middle, and then I had found some, different fabrics with the different characters on it, and made kind of just like a border of squares of that fabric around the panel. And so it's not huge, but it's my most favorite movie.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I need Jack Skellington on my wall. I like joke and say he's my boyfriend, and like I have a Jack Skellington mug, and I'm like, I'm having coffee with my boyfriend, and my husband doesn't like that, but it's fine. I'm like, it's a mug, it's fine. But yeah, so I'll swap those out, but the rest of them are just kind of whatever. Like this one on behind me is one that was up because it was my the last pattern I tested for Katerina Rochella.
Oh, okay.
So it's her Zeliga quilt. I was like, well, I'll just make the lap size. Well, her lap size is, or throw size, whatever, ended up being like, it's really long. So it's a good size quilt. I was like, dang, I'm excited about this. So it just came down so I could put up a different quilt on the wall, because we actually run like an Airbnb out of our downstairs area, like in our house. And so we call it the Cozy Quilt House. And so there's quilts everywhere. And
that's great. Well, yeah. Never heard of that before. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun. And so there's quilts in the room, and there's quilts hanging on the wall, and there's quilts in the living room. And so, I mean, they were out and around anyway, but it just kind of gave us an excuse to really put them on display, and for me to keep making more quilts. I was like, oh no, I have to make more quilts.
It's a business expense.
Exactly. I'm like, I have to make this. It's for the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome. Yeah, it's really fun. And I want to make more seasonal type quilts to swap out and keep kind of changing with the seasons, because it's like, if you have the same quilts up there all summer because you don't have any other quilts that are summery, it's like,
yeah,
I love them, but I want to keep rotating them.
Yeah, I've got a few Christmas ones.
Mm-hmm.
I made a Halloween one last spring.
Ooh.
And I've got a couple of Valentine's quilts.
Oh, cute.
Which is and we have a red couch, so they look really good on the red couch.
Oh, that's nice.
But other than that, I don't think I've done any other holidays or anything, but like certainly some are more summery and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of fun to just be like, put the Christmas ones away and then like bring them out at Christmas, and everyone's like, oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, it kind of keeps them special, keeps those ones special, because then it's like tied to those feelings of excitement for that holiday. And I was very excited to make my quilt. And then my mom used the same fabric as I did, like the same fabric line, and made herself a giant Christmas quilt.
Oh yeah.
She kind of used my scraps, like the leftovers I had from mine, and incorporated them into hers. And she obviously got more fabric and made her own thing. But then she made like almost a king size quilt for her Christmas quilt. And
wow,
she just kept adding her jam. And this one behind me is on the wall, is one she made, and you can tell because she loves to like stack borders. she'll put like
Oh,
2 or
okay.
3 borders on a quilt because she just wants to like, let's make it bigger. Let's make it bigger. Which I love because then she's always making huge quilts. But anyway.
Borders are my least favorite part. Like I find it so tedious and
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm like, I just want to be done, right? By that time, after you've made all the blocks, I'm like, oh, borders now. But
No.
I appreciate it. And it does help to like build it out and make it a little bit bigger if you want it to fit on a bed or something like that.
Yeah.
And I like the look of it. I just always like, borders.
I know. Those long strips, you're like, seriously?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and she taught me her method of adding borders, and I know it's not hers personally, but she was the first person to tell me like, oh, you can do borders this way. And in my episode with her, she explains it, but you like measure each side of the quilt independently of itself, and so whatever length that is, you sew your strips together and then you cut it to that exact length, and then you pin the ends, like the border ends, to the ends of the quilt top, and then kind of just stretch it along to make sure it fits, because like otherwise you end up with super wavy borders that have tons of volume in them. And so then when we go to long arm them, we're like, we can't do this, it's too much fabric. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
or like putting borders on the bias is like, oh, please don't.
Oh.
Because it makes them so stretchy.
Right.
So,
yeah. Yeah. That's not good.
No. But just finding those little tricks of like making sure that they go on well and lay flat, and it makes it not so bad. But yeah, I kind of am with you. I'm like, I guess I have to sew this long strip of fabric to the side of my long quilt right now. And it just feels like you're just shoving the fabric through. You're like, am I done yet?
Yeah. Oh no, I have to do the other side of it now.
Oh no, there's another 70 inches, and then there's another 90 inches and another 90 inches. Like,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. But it can really make a difference. It looks nice, right?
Yeah.
Like it looks finished, and I do appreciate it. I just don't like doing
Yeah.
it. Like some people don't like binding. I'm like, I don't mind binding. It's fine.
I don't like binding.
I don't mind it at all. I think it's kind of like, all right, it's the last step. But blind borders, nah, forget it.
Yeah. Like I get it quilted and then I'm like, there's still more to do. And it'll depend on the quilt, but for my own personal quilts, I mostly just stitch them on with like by machine. I don't hand bind them, but for client quilts, we'll hand bind if it's like, if it calls for it. Sometimes we'll machine stitch them on if it's like, this is going to be a bed quilt, or this is for a baby, or, so just the sturdiness factor. But for the most part, we hand bind client quilts. But for myself, I just want it on. I want it done. So I just shove it through the machine, put them on.
Yeah, I don't mind hand binding if I have the time, because I find it is sort of, I like that repetitive motion. If I'm watching a movie or whatever, and maybe it'll take 2 or 3 nights to actually finish, but I don't mind that so much. But if it's like I'm on a deadline, I need to get this, out there by a certain time. I'm just like, machine.
Do you like to try to use like matching thread to the binding fabric, or do you like to do like a contrast?
I like to match. I like to match it if I can. But then I always get to this, like, there's always like the decision of, do I want to match it to the binding, even if it's not going to match the backing fabric, because maybe that's a different color? Can I use a different color thread and bobbin? Am I going to have tension issues? And then like, there's all these like decisions, like, okay, what can I sacrifice here that's going to still look good, but not drive me crazy? So it always sort of, it's a bit of a juggling act of, and how tired am I because I'm doing this at 2 a.m. and I just want it done. No, but I typically try to match it. But then I'll do like stripy binding. And then how do you match a stripy binding? Because you can't really achieve that. So I don't know. It always depends on what what the look is. And
yeah.
But I've never done anything like hand, what is it, like big stitch binding, where it's like
Either.
it's supposed to obviously be, not
Yeah.
the same color. I love the look of that, but I've just never really, never gotten into it.
Yeah, me either. I don't know that I have the patience to like, and make sure that the stitches are even and like, because you're gonna see them. But if I'm just doing the invisible stitch to do normal hand binding, I'll do a coordinating thread. But if I'm machine binding it, especially if it's my own, like if it's a client quilt, I'll match the thread. But if it's mine, sometimes I want it to pop, so I will pick.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
Yeah. It just depends. I mean, it totally depends on the quilt, but like if it's a bright, fun, crazy quilt, I want it to continue. And so I just slap a bright thread on there and, one that matches and hope for the best. But it seems to work out pretty good. And I don't know.
Well, that's good, because then it's like, it's its own design feature too, right? Like, if you do it with intention and it's got a nice contrast and you're doing it on purpose and you're able to keep that stitch line fairly consistent, then
I think overall it works out. And I mean, I enjoy it because I like to put color thread in my quilting too. So and with our quilting machine, we have a ton of different colors of thread, and so I'm like, what's the brightest, most obnoxious one I can use on which one's going to stand out the most? And because I think there's obviously a time and place for just like standard white thread and simple quilting, but I love to use like big crazy pantographs and get those colors on there so you can see that part. And I don't know.
With a pantograph, can you change up the colors throughout the quilt? Or
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you can get some interesting effect with that then.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll do like this one that's in my chair behind me. I did a different color thread on the back than I did on the front. And they're both super light and subtle because it just felt more in theme with these fabrics. They're the Gloria fabrics by Maureen Cracknell. So they're more kind of nostalgic and softer color palette, but yeah, I did like a gold on the back because the back is more of a soft pale color, and then on the front I did a super light like teal blue.
Oh wow, okay.
It's not super, you can't really tell, but it just is enough to kind of pop it off the fabric, and you can see the pantograph really well. But so sometimes I'll do that too. And
oh, that's fun.
It just completely depends on the quilt itself. And
yeah,
what are you saying to me? Tell me who you want to be. So
yeah, I kind of approach that too. I mostly use white, but I'm trying to branch out a bit more. And I bought a box of, what is it, like 12 really bright colors, and I'm determined to the last few quilts I've made, I'm like, I'm going to use the bright colors. And then I was like, I can't do it. So I'm trying to find like the right project. Actually, this one behind me, I used 2 colors of thread, no white. There's like a pink and a pale aqua. And so you can't really see it obviously on here, but if you look close, you can see. And so on some of the lines, they're pink, and some of the, I think the rows are, one way it goes pink, the other way it goes teal or aqua. So that's kind of fun. But I'm like, with this box of like really bright colored threads, I'm like, okay, I want to just like go crazy on some quilt and just use all of them, or at least 6 of them or something, and just see what happens. But I haven't worked up to that yet.
It's a commitment. It really is, because you're like, all right, this is going to be on this quilt forever, so I better like it.
It better be good.
Yeah. We have well, I got super inspired because Haley from Spring Daisy Stitchery, she had one of her quilts long armed in neon pink, and I was like, I'm
Ooh.
ordering neon pink thread. So we did. And now I'm like, what am I going to use this for? But I do have a couple quilts in progress that I think it would be, and they're Tula pink fabrics, so I think it'll be perfect. So
right, yeah.
I think
It could even be really cool on something like a really monochromatic, like black and white quilt or something, and just have like this pop of neon pink would be really fun.
Yeah, I kind of was thinking that too. I was like, oh, that would be so fun to just do like a black and gray or like a black and white quilt, and then just have like the neon pink just be like, ah.
Yeah, really pop out at you.
Yeah, and then you could do like a neon pink binding to really.
Oh yeah, totally.
So many ideas ruminating. I love this. Like, hey, I just have to remember this now.
Yeah. Write that down.
Yeah. Hurry, put it in the notes. Yeah, so it's, I don't know, but I do love the, just classic white thread and just letting the quilting be what it is. But yeah, I do understand though, it is a big kind of like, okay, committing to this color and I hope it works. And
yeah,
I don't know, I think it can really enhance the quilt, and sometimes the quilt just doesn't call for it, so it just kind of depends on.
Yeah, sometimes you just want the shapes of the blocks or the fabrics to stand out, and you don't want the quilting to, like, a lot of times I finish a quilt top and I'm like, I just love how smooth it is. There's no quilting lines to like distract from it. So I'm like, how can I keep that quality without interrupting it, but still doing the quilting, because you have to do the quilting.
Make it a quilt. Not a quilt unless you quilt it.
And when I first started out, I just only did stitch in the ditch because I was like, oh, this is easy. You can't see the quilting lines. It's not easy, but I thought it was easy. Like realized later, no, there's easier things to do. Yeah. But and I mean, I typically keep my quilting pretty loosey-goosey. Like I don't do anything too dense because I'm just doing it on my domestic machine. So, I do my own, keep to my own limits kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I like the feel of a looser quilted quilt too. Like if it's going to be a quilt that I'm going to use, because I feel like it's a little more snuggly that way. And some that I've gotten long arms, my family are like, no, it's too stiff, I don't want to use it. I'm like, okay. Yeah. If you use it, it'll soften up. But
here's the thing about quilts: the more you use them, the softer they get. So
yeah, keep using them.
Yeah, I think that can be a drawback if they are quilted too densely. And sometimes, a pantograph is beautiful, but if it's too dense, it really stiffens up the quilt. But then, just like you said, if you use it and wash it and just keep that use happening, then it will soften up. And
and that's just the life of a quilt. I have a quilt that was my in-laws got it as a wedding gift, so in whatever, the 60s or something. And it's been like used to death. Like it is so soft, I can't even get over how soft it is. It's also like fraying like crazy and in parts and whatever, but like my husband had, when he was a kid, he was like, this is my quilt, and like he loved it. He took it away to college with him, like it was his thing. And then I don't know, about 3 or 4 years ago, my mother-in-law was like, hey, do you want this quilt? And he was like, yes, my quilt. Like I guess he'd forgotten about it or something. And so we got to keep it. And I've just been like fascinated by just how, because it's had this life and of being used and loved and everything, it's like the softest quilt in the house. Like, they could all be like that.
You're like, someday.
Yeah. Just gotta use them and love them and wash them and treat them like part of the family.
Yeah, for sure. I know. We have multiple quilts in our room that are on our bed every night, and my boys have their quilts, and I'm like, use them, like wash them, keep them around, and they'll soften up and be this wonderful thing, for your whole life if you take care of them. And it's just fun. And like my mom still has her baby blanket that her grandma made her, and same thing, she's like would just like put fabric around the original one and just like bind it up so that it was still in there, but
Oh yeah.
like wore out so much that it's got like 3 different layers on it because it's been, but it's so soft and like so, obviously we don't like mess around with it. It's just on display, but in her house. But it's just that, yeah, the idea to know that like something has been loved so much, like all that softness has come from like people loving that quilt and
Yeah.
and just like feeling loved with it. And I don't know, I just, that idea to me is just warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, this hobby that we have or business that we have actually brings a lot of joy and comfort and warmth, and I love that part of it.
Me too. I do too. And yeah, it's just sometimes I stop and go, oh my gosh, I've made quilts for people all over the country. And it's just like so nice to know that like I was able to bring joy to somebody, or like that they're gonna hopefully have that quilt for a really, really long time, and know that hopefully they can see and experience my passion and my love for it, and understand that they're getting something that means a lot to me to make, and then hopefully means a lot to them as well. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just think
And
that,
just becomes part of their home too, right? Like it's always
yeah,
on the couch or it's always on the bed or whatever, and that's just sort of part of their own family. um I don't know, they're not tradition, but their family's, experience,
yeah,
and as they grow older and move out and then they come home and see it, it just feels like home. And
yeah,
I like that.
yeah. And to know like, oh, that will be mine someday, or just know like we
Right.
made so initially the job started with making 2 quilts for like twin daughters, similar quilt, but well, we made the same exact quilt for them, but one of them had like blue backing and the other one had purple backing, and then we embroidered their names in the border. So, they were different a little.
Yeah.
And
Special. Yeah.
yeah, and we used the scraps to make quilts for their American Girl dolls. And
Oh
then
yeah.
and then immediately like she got them and she was like, okay, now my son wants one. I was like, oh really? Okay, well, we're, whenever you're ready. She's like, I'm ready. And she like immediately placed another order. We were like, okay. So then we made her son a quilt, and she's like, I might have to get one for my last kid, but we'll see. I'm like, okay, well, we're here anytime. But just knowing
Oh,
like those kids, like, and had us make them queen size so that they could grow into them. And like,
oh wow.
yeah, like I was like, man, that's so smart, because you think, oh, I'm gonna make this baby quilt for this baby. Well, they only stay a baby for such a small amount of time, and then the quilt is small and they're like, oh, that's my cute baby blanket, and they put it away. But if you give them something larger that they can use for longer, it's like, oh yeah, then they can kind of grow into it, and they can keep using it when they're giant adults, because they don't have, they're not
Yeah.
losing any, I don't, what am I trying to say?
Well,
Anyway.
it just becomes their quilt, and they'll always have those attachment, memories from when they were a kid, and
Yeah.
put it away somewhere special if they don't want to use it as an adult, because then it becomes a little more precious. But then like give it on to their kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just a nice part of their story, right?
Yeah.
Growing
Yeah.
up.
And if it's, well, yeah, that's what I was gonna, my brain sometimes, like they don't lose the ability to be able to use it and cuddle with it if it's big enough, if they can grow into it. That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. I like
Wow.
that idea of giving a queen size quilt for a baby gift, because like
Yeah.
that's, yeah, most people don't do that. They just like want something they can use right now as a baby.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, why not?
Yeah.
They're
Like,
gonna grow.
right. And I think I think that concept of like, no, I want your kid to like grow with this. I want this to be something that they have for a long time. And giving that idea of like, this isn't just like a receiving blanket that you purchase at the store,
Yeah.
like, oh, I got it at Target. No, I made this for you. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, I have a girlfriend who's having a baby soon, and I've made her a quilt, and I can't wait to like share it all over the place because I'm in love with it. Uh, but I made it pretty large. It's like 55 by 60, so it's not small, but it's something that she can use for most of her life, you know, and it's even as an adult, it's still a good lap size. And
Right.
she might not want she might not want it as an adult because it's kind of, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, it's just that idea of like, yeah, here's this tiny square, good luck using it, and then having to put it away. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I want people to use the quilts I make. I want, if I'm giving you a quilt, it's because I want you to love it and use it. And I don't care if your baby pukes on it. I don't care if you spill food on it and stain it. Like, that's life, you know?
Yeah.
It shows that you've loved it and lived with it. And that's more important to me than being like, I preserved it perfectly. I'll be like, no, take it out.
That's not the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I think too, like, going all the way back to like talking about traditional quilt blocks and all that, I think, you know, pulling that nostalgia back into new quilts kind of makes it feel like, okay, I feel like I can use this quilt because it's almost got this feeling like it already has been used for years. And it doesn't feel like this art piece necessarily,
right,
as much as it's like, oh, that's a quilt, like I'm supposed to use that, I'm supposed to wrap up in that. And
right,
kind of like that idea.
Yeah, it doesn't just go on the wall or something.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a really good point too, because like if it's something you intend for them to hopefully use throughout their life, then it's not going to go out of style, right? Like it's a classic design or traditional modern feel, but it's not going to be like, oh, that looks so dated, like 15 years from now or 20 years from now. It's going to feel like, yeah, no, this is like, it has a life, you know, can be used over a lifespan. So yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but future proofing our designs.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of a step that that we can take as like current modern quilters to go, you know, we want to preserve this. We want this thing, we want our quilts and quilting in and of itself to keep going and be able to bring it into the future. And so how do we like design now so that when it is the future, our quilts stand up the test of time, and like we don't go, oh, that's an old granny quilt, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think I still talk to people who I'm like, oh, I'm a quilter, and they're like, oh, and then I show them pictures and they're like, oh.
Yeah.
Their tone changes because they think, they're like, oh, I was thinking like old brown, you know. I'm like, no, that's still out there. I mean, I think there was definitely a pocket of time where that was still popular, but it's not like that anymore. Like there's so much more to it than just that. And so I think the more of us are out there sharing it, the more it can kind of permeate common society, and more people will have that in their vision and know that like, oh, I can have a quilt and it doesn't have to be like my grandma's old ratty thing and tuck it away. It can be a piece that enhances my home. And
yeah, it's sort of like knitting. Like when people say that they knit, you don't really go like, oh, you know, like it seems to be a little more accepted as something that younger people do now. And I think quilting is kind of getting there, but there's still a lot of like, oh, you're, you know, quilting. Yeah. Think of like a bunch of old grannies sitting around and no, that's not what I do. But and I get that too. Like when I show people what I do, they're like, oh, this is not what I thought. So yeah. It's just putting it out there, showing people what you do, talking about it.
And it's the best, like changing people's perspective on it, because then all of a sudden they're like, oh, like, okay, like this is cool. Like then they start to consider things that they never would have considered, or they start to see ideas of like, how can I incorporate this into my life? And maybe not necessarily everyone, but it's just kind of cool to see people like think of it as like a thing that they can have done or that they can do, instead of just being like, I don't, quilts or whatever, that's what old ladies do. And but you know, like we recently had like 2 in the same week. It was so random, but two men ordered quilts from us, like custom quilts to have made. They're gifting them to their fiancés, like it's their wedding gift to their
Oh,
new
wow.
wife. I'm like, you're a genius. And one of them is like, it's a premium pattern, but it's like Zelda and like all the different elements from the video game, and it looks pixelated. It's going to be so cute. And then the other one is like each block, like he like planned out each block and like what he wanted, and he was like, I know you have to do it however you do it, but this is just like the general what I want in it. And I just shared it in our Instagram because it turned out so cool. But yeah, we just chatted back and forth about different elements that he wanted in there, and he sent us his designs, and we made them happen. We had to applique some stuff, and we embroidered some things, and it turned out so cool. And I was like, this is such a cool gift. Like, who thinks like I'm gonna give my new wife a quilt for a wedding present?
Yeah, that's pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
And both of those sound really special and like custom for sure, but also like really special to those individuals. And that's really sweet. I love that.
Yeah. I was just like, this is adorable. But
I'll have to check out that post and see. I haven't seen it yet, so I'll have to check that out. That sounds really awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun. And at first we were kind of like, I don't know, this might be weird. But as we started putting it together, we were like, oh, this is actually so cute. So yeah, I just think
it makes me wonder, like, or I want to see like the unboxing, like when he gives a tour. I want to see.
I know, I'm like, please tag us in your social media to see what happens. I don't think they get married until August. Yeah, I know. I embroidered their wedding date, so I remember it's in August, so we'll have to wait. But I'm really hoping that they like do post videos or photos about it and tag us, because I'm like, I really want to see this happen.
Yeah, no kidding. And like you're already done and it's June. Like, I'm blown away. Like, everything I do is last minute.
well, my husband and I are actually going on a big trip here in a couple weeks, and we're going to be gone for most of the month. And so, because it's our 10th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow.
So we're taking a big trip. Thank you. So
where are you going?
We're going to Barcelona.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've been to Spain before, but my husband never has. He's been like all over Europe. He lived in Japan for a while. Because he was living the military life before we met. But so he's been everywhere, but he's never been to Spain. And when I went, it was back in high school, so a long time ago, and we stayed near kind of Madrid, and so we never made it over to Barcelona. And I was like, I really want to go there. Like, I've seen everything in Madrid. It's great. I love it, and it's super cool, but I really want to experience Barcelona. And so we were like, screw it, we're going.
Wow, good for you. That's amazing. That'll be so fun.
Yeah, but we're starting our trip in Vegas, which was our original plan, because that's where we actually got married, in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let's go to Las Vegas. There's this Sting concert, because I've loved Sting since I was a little girl, and so I was like, this will be so fun. There's a concert right near our anniversary, so we can be in Las Vegas, and and then we're like, well, we can just go somewhere cool from Las Vegas. And so
just fly from there. Yeah, why not?
it just evolved into chaos, but it's going to be super fun. So anyway, yeah. So my mom and I have been like busting through our orders to try to like get all the kind of more intricate stuff done. Like,
yeah.
We're kind of worried we're going to take longer, because I'm not going to be here to work on stuff with her. So so yeah, we were trying to get those like kind of trickier ones done first and get them out the door, so that she's not like, it's not like looming over her head by herself. So
yeah, that's good.
That's the only kind of downer of being self-employed, is that like, when you leave, no work is getting done.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. I've got a week of holidays planned this summer.
Ooh.
And everyone's like, really, just a week? I'm like, I can't take off more than a week. Like, nothing will happen if I am gone longer than that. Even that's stressing me out, but it is what it is. So
yeah,
Yeah.
Hey there, just popping in to say we divided this episode into 2 parts because Holly and I had such an amazing conversation that we just kept chatting. And so to keep our episodes to about an hour, we wanted to split it up. So this is part 1.